What happens when a ruthless gang walks into a bar and starts making threats, only to find a black woman standing in their way? Watch as the gang underestimates the woman because of her color and attacks her. But what they don't know is that she is a retired professional boxer and have spent her entire life fighting. Are you ready for an unforgettable story that will keep you on the edge of your seat? Get ready to witness a battle like no other. If you're excited to see what happens next, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and let us know where you're watching from in the comments. We can't wait to hear from you. Let the adventure begin. Lena sat quietly in the corner of the bar, her back resting against the wood of the chair, taking slow, deliberate sips from her soda. She was the kind of person who didn't need to speak often to be heard. Her calm, composed presence had a way of making people notice her without her saying a word. The soft, low murmur of conversation around her didn't bother her, nor did the occasional burst of laughter from the other patrons. To anyone else, it might have been a chaotic scene, but to Lena, it was just noise, background to her own world of thoughts. No one had noticed the gang as they entered, but Lena did. They came in like a storm of their own. A rough bunch of men, their boots echoing loudly against the wooden floor as they swaggered toward the bar looking for trouble. The leader of the group was a burly man with a jagged scar across his cheek that told a story of years spent in brawls and fights. He was the type of man who didn't need to say much to make others afraid, but his presence alone demanded respect. Lena continued to sip her soda, her eyes flicking toward the group, but she didn't flinch. Her gaze remained calm, composed, as if she hadn't noticed them at all. But she had. She always noticed everything. The leader, seeing her alone in the corner, felt the need to assert his dominance. He smirked and whispered something to his friends, his eyes narrowing as he pointed in Lena's direction. His gang members followed his lead, their grins wide and hungry, like wolves scenting a weak animal in the wild. Lena had been in situations like this before, thugs trying to push around someone they thought was defenseless. But tonight, there was something different in the air. It wasn't fear she felt, it was anticipation. The room had shifted and Lena knew it. The gang made their way toward her, their footsteps deliberate. The sound of their approach cut through the noise of the bar, and Lena's heart picked up pace. Not out of fear, but out of instinct. There was a storm coming, and she was ready for it. The gang moved closer to Lena. The scarred leader, a man who exuded arrogance with every movement, leaned over her table, his face close enough that Lena could smell the stale cigarettes on his breath. His eyes glinted with an unsettling mix of amusement and malice. "This is our spot, sweetheart. Move along," he sneered, his voice like gravel scraping against metal. The other men behind him chuckled, low and menacing, their laughter rippling through the room like a warning. Lena didn't flinch. She simply kept her gaze steady, unfazed, as if she were a stone in the middle of a storm. Her heart thudded in her chest, but it wasn't from fear. It was from the anticipation that came with knowing she was about to face down a challenge. She had been in countless fights before, some of them much worse than this. But something about the way these men approached her felt different, more personal. The tension was palpable, and the eyes of everyone in the room were now on her. The air had grown still as the bar's patrons held their breath, waiting to see how the lone woman in the corner would react. Lena's hands remained calm at her sides, but she could feel the heat of the other gang members standing just behind her. They were close enough that she could hear their breathing, their shifting of weight, the slight creak of their boots against the floor. She could almost feel their anticipation too. They were waiting for her to be scared, waiting for her to back down. She stood up, and when she did, it was something else, something that had to do with the way Lena moved. There was no rush in her actions, no sign of fear. She was calm, her stance measured, every muscle in her body coiled like a spring. Ready, waiting. "I'm not going anywhere," she said firmly, her voice smooth but unmistakably strong. It wasn't a challenge, it was a statement, a fact. The scarred leader scoffed, stepping back with a sneer. "You think you can take us all on?" He laughed, but the sound was tight, unsure. His friends echoed his laughter, but it wasn't the carefree noise they had made earlier. It was more of a defensive, uncomfortable chuckle. They had underestimated her. He raised an eyebrow, waiting for the rest of his gang to step in, their fists clenching, but Lena didn't move. She just stood there watching them with a gaze that seemed to pierce through their bravado. Her body was poised, ready for whatever they would do next. But deep down, she knew one thing for sure. Tonight wasn't going to end the way they expected. Without warning, the scarred leader lunged forward and shoved Lena with all his weight. The force knocked her backward, causing her to stumble. A sharp gasp rippled through the crowd of onlookers, who were now leaning forward, waiting to see what would happen next. But Lena, despite the unexpected blow, didn't fall. She didn't even lose her balance for long. Her body, honed from years of training, reacted instinctively. She planted her feet, her legs braced as she regained her posture in an instant. It was as if time slowed, her mind clear and focused. In the next heartbeat, something incredible happened. Her movement shifted from hesitant to lightning quick, as though she had practiced this dance 1,000 times. There was a fluidity in her motion that startled the gang members. Her arms moved with the precision of a fighter. Each step, each turn, executed perfectly. Her hands, once resting by her sides, flew into action, a blur of power. In a single clean punch, Lena's fist connected with the scarred leader's jaw. It landed with a sharp crack, and the man's eyes widened in shock as his body went limp. He crashed to the floor with a thud that echoed in the now dead quiet room. The gang members froze. Their leader, the one they had all followed with such arrogance and pride, was knocked out cold in a single hit. The room had gone silent, as if everyone had suddenly realized they were in the presence of something far more dangerous than they had imagined. Lena stood tall, her chest rising and falling with controlled breath, her stance unwavering. She didn't need to say a word to show them who she was, but she did anyway, her voice calm, yet carrying the weight of 1,000 unspoken battles. "I'm not just some woman you can push around," Lena said, her words slicing through the silence like a blade. The gang members, now realizing they had made a grave mistake, exchanged nervous glances. The confidence they had walked into the bar with was quickly evaporating. They had thought her an easy target, someone to intimidate, to bully. But now the tables had turned. They could feel the shift in the air, the tension rising like a storm about to break. Before any of them could move, Lena's eyes flashed with a quiet confidence, the kind that comes from knowing exactly what you're capable of. She was no longer the woman in the corner sipping soda. She was a force, a professional, a fighter who had been through far worse than this. "You thought I was just some easy target, didn't you?" "Well, you're wrong," she added, her voice cool but piercing, like an unshakable truth. Lena's body shifted, her weight centered, and she took a fighting stance. Every part of her was poised for whatever came next. She wasn't about to back down. She wasn't about to let them take control. If they wanted a fight, they would get one. And this time, they weren't going to win. One by one, the gang members lunged at Lena, trying to overpower her with brute force. But they were no match for her speed and skill. She moved like a professional boxer, quick, controlled, and precise. Her body flowed with each movement, dodging their wild swings and landing clean, sharp punches. Her fists were a blur, each one landing with the perfect amount of force to send a gang member tumbling to the floor. The first man, who tried to charge her from the side, found himself on the ground with a swift kick to the knee. The second, a burly figure with tattoos covering his arms, couldn't even land a punch before Lena's right hook sent him crashing to the floor. The third man, the largest of the group, charged at her with a roar, his fists swinging in wild arcs. But Lena sidestepped effortlessly, her movements a dance of fluidity and precision. With a quick jab to his stomach, he gasped for breath and collapsed in pain. One by one, the gang members fell. Their pride shattered and their bodies knocked to the floor like rag dolls. The last of the gang members, the loud-mouthed one who had been taunting her from the start, hesitated. He stood a few feet back. He had been the most confident, the most sure of himself. His face, once full of bravado, had gone pale. "Wait!" he shouted, his voice cracking with fear. "You're a boxer, aren't you?" Lena didn't answer immediately. She simply stood there. Finally, Lena met his gaze. She nodded slowly. "I'm a professional," she said softly, her voice cool but full of power. "And you should have known better than to mess with me." The gang member gulped, his eyes wide with realization that they had underestimated her in the worst way possible. He took one more look at his fallen comrades and then, without another word, turned and bolted for the door, his fear taking him away from the bar in a rush. The rest of the room, which had been eerily silent throughout the confrontation, erupted in applause. The people who had been watching, unsure of what would happen, now cheered and clapped, some standing in admiration of Lena's strength and composure. The gang had been defeated, humiliated, and with nothing left to say, they had quickly fled. Lena, unfazed by the attention, turned to the bartender who had been watching her with wide eyes. He stood there, mouth open in shock, unable to look away from the scene that had unfolded before him. With a calm, collected smile, Lena straightened herself and returned to her seat. "I think I'll stay for one more drink," she said nonchalantly, picking up her soda once more, as though nothing had happened. The room settled back into a stunned silence, but this time, the silence was different. It was filled with respect. Lena's face remained calm and composed, but inside she knew that the people in that room had witnessed something far more important than a fight. They had seen that strength didn't come from the size of your body or the loudness of your voice, but from the fire in your heart, the courage to stand up and fight for yourself when the world expects you to fall. And Lena knew, without a doubt, that no one would ever underestimate her again. What a story. I hope you were as hooked as we were. If you enjoyed this intense journey, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more thrilling stories. Don't forget to drop a comment and tell us what you thought about the twist. We love hearing from you. And if you're ready for more action, stay tuned for our next adventure. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.